Whatever the ceiling that you had for Tyrese Maxey as a basketball player, it is time to raise that once again. The Sixers star is in the midst of his superstar ascension, putting on another ridiculous display with a career-high 54 points against the Milwaukee Bucks. Doing it right in Doc Rivers' face and putting the league on notice, he has elevated the Sixers team to new heights around it and backed up the very words that he said of Media Day for setting the Sixers standard. Doing a dive into how this changes everything in the short and long term for the Sixers team, just gloat about the player that Tyrese Maxey has become and why I still don't think that ceiling has been hit for him directly. So to dive into things here, we are coming off a career high performance for Tyrese Maxey, 54 points, 9 assists, 5 rebounds, 2 steals and 3 blocks, had 6 made three-pointers there. He was a plus 18 in an overtime victory against the Milwaukee Bucks. Now I know the immediate pushback here is the amount of minutes that he's playing. We will touch on that for a second, but just want to acknowledge the true greatness that is being put on display on the court. And by that I mean that looking around the league, the complete list of guards to average 33 plus points per game on 60% plus true shooting for the first 15 games of a season. We're talking Michael Jordan, James Harden, Luka Doncic, and Tyrese Maxey. That's right. That is the end of the list. And he's doing it in such unique ways. Like, this stat is really insane coming from Bobby Marks here, as he says an interesting stat on Tyrese Maxey last night. Per at ESPN Insights and Genius IQ, Maxey has made a career-high 7 layups with his left hand, the most made layups by any player with their non-shooting hand in a game this season. And I will say, while that is an obscure stat right there, you feel it as far as that being an option in his offensive attack. The lefty floater that he has, the finishes around the basket, his finishing package for a guy of his size is absurd here. This is not like a LeBron James flying through the air. This is a smaller guard by NBA standards that is able to just hang in the air, get under the rim, and create these really unique angles. And by the way, the three-point percentage that he's shooting, as I will acknowledge the full stats on the season overall, we're talking 33.4 points per game, 7.9 assists, 4.1 made three-pointers, and shooting splits of 47, 42, and 88. The only player that is top 5 in both points per game and assists per game. To lay out the full stats for Maxey directly here, we're talking 40.7 minutes per game, which is number 1 in the league, 33.4 points per game, which is top 3 in the league there, 7.9 assists, 4.7 rebounds, the most made field goals per game of every player in the league, and that 42.1% three-point percentage there, the reason that is so impressive to me is it is one thing if you want to be, a Duncan Robinson type, or a guy that is purely a stand in the corner and hit spot up threes. And Duncan does get a little bit more off motion than that, but you understand my point as a catch and shooter. These are not the looks that Tyrese Maxey are getting. These are self-generated. These are step back. These are from 5 feet from beyond the three-point arc, and he's still knocking them down at this absurd efficiency there. Last night was a night where they needed every single one of those 54 from Tyrese Maxey, and he delivered, including knocking down a pair of free throws to tie the game and force it to overtime in the first place. And again, there was something a little bit special to me about doing it right in Doc Rivers' face. That shout out to Maxey. He is all class, going over, shaking hands, doing things. But there has to be something that burns inside him. Let's not forget that when Doc Rivers was in control of this Sixers team, that playoff run, and I get that Tyrese Maxey's a better player now than he was at that point, but there was always a flash and a pop and a ability that he possessed that could have helped the Sixers team. In that playoff run with Doc Rivers as the head coach and Tyrese Maxey's a rookie, Furkan Korkmaz played more playoff minutes than Maxey. That just could not happen at the time and is even clearer now. Now, to dive into a couple other things that I do want to speak about from the box score here, Paul George, man, setting the tone that it is nice to see him back on the floor in a Sixers uniform and looking like Paul George. In 25 minutes, he had 21 points, shot 7 of 12 from the field, 4 of 7 from beyond the three-point arc, added 5 rebounds and 3 assists, also a pair of steals there. There was a little bit of carelessness with the ball that I could do with that, but just having a true wing, a guy like Paul George directly there, is such an asset to the Sixers team, especially with Kelly Oubre Jr. out and really that already being a weakness with this Sixers team there. We will see how completely he settles in, but ultimately Paul George looks like Paul George to me, and that is far more encouraging than I expected to feel about him at this time. I also think he does deserve credit because it has looked very calculated and intentional that the rate that he starts game is I'm playing in attack mode. He scored the first 5 points in his first game back. He scored the first 11 for the Sixers last night. That is great stuff from Paul George, exactly what you want to see, being a bit of a tone setter in a way that kind of hasn't been the expectation, that he is more of a fit-in guy based on the other context of the team, all these other talents. But we know he was brought here for a reason, paying a ton of money for a reason, and it's encouraging to see that. Now, a couple other notes that I do want to make. Justin Edwards played 31 minutes last night, shot 3 of 10 from the field, 1 of 7 from 3, and I thought he was excellent. I thought defensively he bought in, really picked up a lot of the slack, and the fact that Nick Nurse allowed him on the floor for that length of time while he was struggling so much as a shooter, I think is really telling for the level of trust that Nurse does possess there. VJ Edgecombe has certainly cooled down a bit from his red-hot start to the season there, but still think he makes a positive impact just about every single night. He finished last night with 12 points, led the team with 10 rebounds, which is not a characteristic that you expect for a guard or a player of his style there. Also had 3 assists. Did struggle a bit as a shooter, 5 of 14 from the field, 2 of 4 from beyond the three-point arc there, but really encouraged. The thing that is really standing out to me about VJ is he has a knack for getting like those rebounds that sort of change games. And the comparison that I would throw is think back to that Knicks series where Josh Hart seemed to get every back-breaking rebound. It feels like VJ Edgecombe has that type of instinct, and there's been a couple instances where it's already been put on display this season. That's something that really matters. Like the Sixers, for the better part of a decade now, have been a team that have been the team on the other end of that, where teams are able to pull in that crucial rebound that really sways the momentum or extends a possession that changes the outlook of a game. They have more of those guys, whether it be VJ Edgecombe, Dominic Barlow, Jabari Walker, I think, has kind of an instinct for that as well. Really encouraged by that being a storyline. Also did want to throw it down to the bench unit a little bit. I love what I see with Dominic Barlow. Continue to. For Quentin Grimes directly, he hit a huge 3 in overtime and really stepped up down the stretch, finishing with 14 points there. And Jared McCain showing some signs of life again. Had 8 points last night, 2 of 7 from beyond the three-point arc, 3 of 8 from 3. You can see the confidence growing there. He's still not what he once was, and he still is settling in to how he fits into this team and finding his full level of play, but ultimately really encouraged. And I do think as we have this conversation for how do you scale down the level of minutes that Tyrese Maxey is currently intaking now, Jared McCain is in a large part the solution to that problem. That's sort of the guard duos or guard, I guess, backup / starter situation that we're breaking down. And I do think that you should likely have 3 of these guys on the floor for a better part of the rotation of a game here. But I do think it is Maxey and McCain as sort of the pairing, and then it's Edgecombe and Grimes as the pairing there. And again, I want these guys to be interchangeable to an extent. I want to see 3 of them on the floor for depending on the matchup and depending on the context, who you have around them there. But I do think McCain is the guy that needs to eat into those Maxey minutes. Not because I think he's better than him or that he can surpass him as a talent, but just for the fact of keeping this guy's legs fresh for the entire 82-game season and heading into the playoffs there. But the story of last night and really the story of this Sixers season is 100% Tyrese Maxey. The fact that he stood at the podium at Sixers Media Day and said, I want to set a standard for what you can expect from the Sixers team every single night, and then did that, that is real deal leader, franchise, face of the organization type stuff from Tyrese Maxey, and he continues to deliver every single night. It's beyond impressive. That last night against the Bucks, and I understand it was a team without Giannis. This is not like a major threat in the Eastern Conference, although I will say guys like Ryan Rollins really impressed me. Miles Turner I thought played well. Even Kyle Kuzma had some flashes there. They're not a nothing team either. But this was a game that the Sixers should win last night if they want to be serious as a contending team or a playoff team, which I do think is going to be the case. And by the way, I know I get pushback on that take. My response to that is just look at the rest of the Eastern Conference. Like the Brooklyn Nets have 0 chance. The Washington Wizards, the Indiana Pacers, even the Charlotte Hornets. Those are basically 4 teams that I give like 0% chance of making any sort of playoff push. The Hornets you can talk me into a little if they get hot, but it has not looked pretty to this point. So you're basically talking about one team in the Eastern Conference not making at least the play-in tournament. I think the Sixers are head and shoulders better than all those teams that I just mentioned there. And there's other teams that I just see more flaws and more potential to slip in the standings to take up that last one spot that will be missing the play-in. So while I understand this kind of comes off as like a homer take here, I look at the rest of the Eastern Conference and just see a lot of bad basketball teams. The Sixers, I think, sits slightly above that. So that's sort of my response to that there. But to bring it back to Tyrese Maxey and the Sixers team, this was a matchup last night where it felt like he had the mindset of, I'm not letting us lose. If it takes 50 points, if it takes 75 points, whatever that number is, I'm going to get us there with this Sixers team. And he did exactly that. So shout out to Tyrese Maxey. I really do think that this is a guy that deserves to be in real deal MVP conversations based on the level that he's playing to this. Where would this Sixers be without Tyrese Maxey? That is a scary question to honestly think about, both for this year specifically, as they would have been a nightmare to watch and a really in that same tier as the Nets and Wizards and Pacers and all those teams that I just mentioned there. And then in the longer scale, if we're not talking about the guy who very clearly is taking the baton for the face of the franchise, being the guy who's been coined the franchise in the first place, I don't know where we would be without Tyrese Maxey. So shout out to Maxey for continuing to put the work in, for really, I think, taking last season on the chin and personal and saying, I'm not letting that happen again. And then, actions speaking louder than words for the way that he has started this season. So cannot believe that this is the peak of where this guy at, and don't even think we're at the very pinnacle of it. This dude works harder than anyone that I can think of as a franchise type player for the Sixers team directly there. He's all about ball, all about the right stuff, and cannot wait to see where the rest of this season, the rest of his career does go. So shout out to Tyrese Maxey for doing everything possible to keep this organization afloat. Shout out to you guys for tuning in this video here. Make sure you give a subscribe if you have not just yet. Drop a like on this video. Your thoughts in the comments. I think Tyrese Maxey is one of the 10 best players in the entire NBA right now. If you think differently, would love to hear what names you could possibly list ahead of him. So drop those in the comments. I don't think that list is very long. Appreciate you guys for tuning in once again. Make sure you're hitting that subscribe button. I'll be back to talk with you next time. Peace.